Don't you find it odd, the story of the angry-sounding John the Baptist calling in the wilderness is the gospel passage for this morning on the Joy Sunday of Advent? John sounds angry. But in the midst of the ire of the material world's attack on everyday human life, perhaps we ought to be angry sometimes as well. Perhaps we see injustice from time to time in our life of faith. I'm sure we do. In the midst of the world of consumerism and militarism, among other isms, John is responding this morning in the time of the Roman Empire. At first, yes, John's words sound frightening. But these scary exhortations are meant for an upper-class world, a world of people in power, a world with people in privilege, a people with prestige, people that may be a part of the leadership of the web of structures that keep the poor and marginalized shut out, the powerful and the mighty who block entry by people in need, military soldiers of the empire who had the power to have access to citizens to take whatever they wanted. Basically, John speaks more to privilege and might in the time of empire at the expense of the weak and the marginalized and the impoverished. John sees that people on the margins who need access the most to the world's resources are prohibited, forbidden from enjoying, partaking, and basically sustaining their own lives. John calls for an end to barriers from the basic things that all Roman citizens need, and also an end to the barriers that keep the privileged blinded by keeping the poor out of sight and out of mind. For people of faith, just knowing that God is on our side, on the side of the poor and on the side of the marginalized, puts us always on the edge of rejoicing. We're always have this sense of innate within us, this sense of joy waiting to bubble up inside us in celebration for the good things that are happening and that are about to happen in our lives and in our world. And we might remember the beginning of John's ministry as being loud, sounding angry, acting with a tone that is certainly aggressive, but let's remember that such is the behavior of a prophet. The prophets of the 8th century began in anger to speak justice to the kings of the time. So for these moments when joy can be difficult to come by, we need to remember to keep optimistic, to maintain a sense of the possibility of joy coming into our world once again, as the baby Jesus did so long ago. From the simple act of watching television news, we see there is many reasons to feel the opposite emotions, those called despair or sadness or sorrow instead. From Roman imperial times, the oppression and fear expressed by God's people led to much despair, sadness, and sorrow. But from this time, Jesus came into the world. And let's keep taking a look. Now we're living in the time of war between Russia and Ukraine. We're living in the time of the Israel-Hamas war at the expense of Palestinian peace and home, rightful home. And this very week, we were reminded of the war in Syria that lasted since 2011 as we watched Damascus fall on live television and saw many other battles in Syria being won by rebel forces. And these events are only referring to military conflicts. I have yet to mention the countless matters that cause more anxiety or unrest, like hunger, the need for a living wage, homelessness, disease, care for the elderly, our families and friends. But I won't leave you here 3 times as long for the sermon. So there are many reasons to feel despair instead of joy. We could each make our own lists in our own lives. My friends, joy is instead a spiritual experience that is lived out by people of faith. And it is beyond happiness or exuberance. It is beyond experience that is lived out by emotion. Joy is more of a state of being for God's people. It encounters the sometimes darkness and seemingly hopeless feelings in the world with much possibility and much contentment that is to come. One image of joy that occurred to me was this memory of live news coverage of the moments after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. On screen were images of rubble everywhere in Port-au-Prince, and that image of the presidential palace. The television picture was panning for us to view the rubble everywhere. And then, as the picture stopped to give us a view of the palace, a woman entered the picture. Even as she seemed, justly so, a little dazed and confused and shaken, she then broke out in singing. And other women from the rubble rose up to follow her, also rejoicing in singing. We were witnessing this on live TV. That's the only way I can describe it, as rejoicing. People exuberant in a time of devastation. A state of being joyful in the midst of disaster. The existence of exuberance in the middle of devastation. A celebration of thanksgiving for their survival indeed. How it was possible with all this going on around them, I think was remarkable. But such is the life of a people of faith. Would you forgive me a moment to mention this one little piece of joy in Newfoundland and Labrador this week? Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador renegotiated the Churchill Falls deal. And once it was announced what exactly was involved in it, if the press is true, it will revolutionize that whole deal and the Newfoundland and Labrador economy. And for those of you who say, Grant, why are you bringing Newfoundland and Labrador politics into your sermon again this morning? To understand why this is so joyful is to understand the history of this hydroelectric deal. And that's all I'll say about that. But watching the fall of Damascus this week and seeing the regime forced into exile also brought rejoicing among the people of Syria. Joy is everywhere when we look for it. And sometimes joy is everywhere because we cannot help but see it because of all that is happening in our world. In the middle of the gospel reading this morning, there is some good news to be sought after in the midst of the doom that John calls us to prepare for. John tells those gathered in response to the three questions he gets asked that there are things that they can do that are good, that make them prone to less judgment. Share what you have with the poor, John said. Do not extort from the poor, John said. Do not threaten anyone who owes you anything, John also said. Or perhaps the good news of the gospel can be summed up with the principle suggested by spiritual director Andrea Lasson Anastas with these words, be content with what we receive. Joy is the sensation of a bubbling up deep inside of the gut of one's soul that just wants to effervesce out in an expression of happy that is shared by all around who are gathered to witness it. Anyone who sees anyone be happy cannot help but also share the happiness. Joy is a state of mind, thus, that is being communal as well as individual. Enter then a community of faith that believes in the wonderful goodness of God in all circumstances that leads God's people to give thanks in this world. I will say that joy has, in times of my life, been an uneasy emotion that I've been unable to trust because of my own experience with mental illness. But I do my best to manage it, and some days I do better than others. And some hours when I'm anxious are managed better than others. And I sometimes wonder why joy just can't simply be joy in a happy time. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? But then I think about what continues to sustain that joy in my life, the life of faith, the presence of family and friends, the wonder of all the goodness around. That reminds me of the light in this world, that reminds me to be happy and to look for places where happiness can be more found. Hope is not far away, help is not far away to sustain the sense of joy in my life. And for those of us who aren't always happy in this season of Advent and Christmas, we do have our Lost to Light service this afternoon to acknowledge that joy is not always the experience in this season. And then, of course, there was my life 20 months ago, when things changed significantly for me for the first time ever, when I fell in love. That was a joyous event. It's like I hit some sort of jackpot, and I don't even gamble. Being United Church of Canada, we're not supposed to gamble. And I no longer mistrust my feelings as much as I used to, because I realize when I see joy, the possibility of joy, that everything is more real. Everything has more presence, more accuracy, more truth, more real, more joy. Joy, yes, is a real emotion that I can trust today, even though I have to work on it some days. And again, I say, thanks be to God for that. As a person of faith, I think I can say I'm beyond being on the edge of rejoicing, which is the title of this morning's meditation, on the edge of rejoicing. So, my friends, may you continue to find joy beyond the edge of rejoicing. May this Advent season be one where joy finds you as well. May this season of Advent be filled with joy after darkness, or in the midst of your daily routine of life, may you also see joy. In the lyrics of Ludwig van Beethoven's Ode to Joy, Friedrich von Schiller penned these words: Joy, daughter of Elysium, thy magic reunites those whom stern custom has parted. All men will become brothers under thy gentle wing. Be embraced, millions. This kiss for all the world. Brothers above the starry canopy, a loving Father must dwell. Joy, beautiful spark of God's, daughter of Elysium. Joy, beautiful spark of God's. Dear friends of the faith, may God always be available to us, drawing up us and gifting us with talents to know how to keep her available, how to keep us awake to her, how to draw ourselves up into times of joy through all of our living. Thanks be to God.